Welcome back to Money Matters. As promised, I'm standing here with Emily Johnson from Polaris Capital, and Emily is going to pick up where I left off. The remarkable amount of political activity seems to not be affecting the markets greatly. So Emily's going to pick up from here and talk to us about the markets, where they've been this past week, and I'll pitch in once in a while if I can think of something interesting to say.
Which you always can. So equity markets, actually, this has been a very interesting week for those of you that follow this. So we, of course, had a lot of political upheaval, which is somewhat expected. I think that it's fair to say that the entire Democratic Party doesn't like President Trump, with a strong doesn't like in that. And even parts of the Republican Party are not necessarily standing strong behind him, but it's not surprising at all that the Democratic Party is going to do everything that they can, along with the media, to try to poke holes in this presidency, and Trump is helping them out quite a bit. So with those two forces at work, you would expect that with that sort of political uncertainty, talk again of impeachment, which this isn't the first time we've heard that from other presidents either, that we would see more of a blip in the equity markets, and that is not at all what's happening. Almost just like what happened back with Clinton and the so-called impeachment that was potential back then. The markets just continued to run. So we're seeing the same thing here. Yes, we had one blip on Wednesday. I believe we closed down 315 points, give or take. And typically what we see on down days these days is we'll have a down day, the market goes down 100, 150 points, and it comes back up and we close either flat or down 10 or something like that. We actually saw that momentum continuing to go down into the close on Wednesday, which was a little bit frightening, and yet at the same time it didn't make a whole lot of sense because the fundamentals still look really good. The likelihood of President Trump being impeached is probably pretty small.
It's tiny.
It's really pretty small. I mean, that's barring any other new news that comes out, who knows. But where things stood, it just didn't make a lot of sense. So when you factor in that, the good fundamentals, sort of the small likelihood of any real massive upheaval in Washington, and you factor in robo-traders and the various algorithmic trading and stuff that goes on that kicks in when markets hit certain levels, it's certainly possible that that's why we saw that continued downtrend in Wednesday, and then just popped right back up again Thursday, Friday. So I believe we're still slightly down for the week, coming now into Friday, but still, it showed that Wall Street doesn't really tie that well to what's going on in Washington. And interestingly, a lot of the news channels that focus on equity markets and focus on markets in general started filming from DC as well as from New York. So
and on my end of it, which I spoke about earlier, but which ties perfectly here, the bond market, the Treasury, the 10-year Treasury, went down over the same period from 2.38% to 2.24%. and is stable there. That's a 5% drop.
And yet volatility, it spiked for a few hours, maybe. That was it. So there was money to be made off of that and off of Wednesday, if you were willing to to take a chance and not believe that Trump's getting impeached. But it's back down to, is it 10, 11?
And I had a casual personal conversation with Emily last week after the show, and I said, Emily, do you think that I should bet against the market? And she said, that would be an interesting bet, but I don't know. And it's again one of these situations where you need a financial advisor who is going to be very disciplined, because this market isn't moving. This market is really quite a stable market. It's moving without a great deal of fluctuation. The underlying economy seems to be quite stable, and the market seems to be quite stable.
And yet, once again, we're seeing equity markets and bond markets moving together, which is typically not what it's supposed to do, but it's back doing it again.
Yeah.
And so, when you talk about betting against the market, I also wouldn't bet against bonds at this point. And we had been such naysayers about bonds for years, expecting that interest rates were going to bump up, but right now, even with the Fed increasing, that's not happening. And
That's
usually they're forward-looking, and that's just not happening. So it could be because we expect that there's going to be a repatriation of funds. It could be because we expect very low economic growth. It could be because of continued low, slow growth and inflation. It could, any of those factors. But it's just not.
Oil is down again, which is one of the only real inflationary pressures that we have.
It seems to be sticking right around sort of 50,
Yeah,
45 to 55.
And that's low.
Oh, sure. Everybody's filling up at $2 a gallon now. So
it's really quite remarkable.
So in theory, that should also drive more economic growth. It should mean that people are. And this is an interesting fact, actually. If you look at how long gas prices have been low, and I'm sure we've all benefited from that. Every time you fill up, it's not $75 anymore. Now it's $35 or so. So that should be a benefit to retail. It should be a benefit to consumer discretionary, to eating out. And interestingly, it is in some of those areas, and it's not in others. As you've seen in retail, specifically brick and mortar retail, have been getting absolutely pummeled because even though people have more money to spend, they're spending it online. They're not, and they're spending it going out to eat. The average ticket at most restaurants is going up slightly. So people are taking that money and they're talking with their pocketbooks. But there's this trend towards the online, the less of the experiential shopping methods is really taking a huge bite out of retail, and probably out of real estate, commercial real estate to some degree too. In fact, a lot of the REITs that we've been looking at that are commercial REITs, even though they have decent yields, have not had a great run here recently because there's so much less interest in commercial real estate. Do you see that in terms of any?
We see it, and what we're concerned about is where the housing market links to the economy. I mean, what's the relationship between the two? If the housing market is going to produce the hundreds of thousands of units necessary to feed the very large millennial generation that's going to buy houses. Everybody needs jobs, and so this wonderful circular monkey pulling on its tail argument comes around and around and around to one of our favorite topics, which is in this growing economy, what is the quality of the jobs that are being produced and where are they being produced? And certainly it doesn't look like at the lower end that $12 an hour, $13 an hour, $14 an hour retail jobs are going to be the growth sector.
Right.
It's not going to be a stable place.
Right.
And yet
very
interesting.
In the residential market, just in talking with realtors, like I'm sure you do on a daily basis, that area that's sort of 600 and below is just hot and hotter.
Hot and hotter because we're being fed, as a local economy, we're being fed by various sectors, job sectors and population sectors all around the country who want to come to a warm, growing area, and we have growth and we have nice weather. So the combination means that people want to retire here, but also young families want to get a start here.
And it doesn't seem to be changing despite this concern in the market. So we always talk about the wealth effect, and if people feel wealthy, even if they haven't realized any profits in their retirement accounts or anything like that, if they're watching it go up on a month-to-month basis, if they're feeling wealthy, then they're more likely to move forward. And despite the political upheaval and the concerns now, people are feeling a little bit more wealthy, or so it seems, and not dialing it back. They're spending.
The things that look to be drivers in the economy, local economy as well as the national economy, are the ones that we continually talk about. The Republicans are correct and the Democrats are correct to be focused on health care. The piece of health care that everybody at least gives lip service to is that universal health care is an objective. Nobody wants any of their neighbors to not have health care. The other piece that seems to be universally accepted and really is, I think, going to end up being the focus of the healthcare debate is healthcare costs.
Right.
Healthcare costs are very high in the United States, and we have a sufficiently sloppy system. And that's one of the things that I see in my daily business working with people who are trying to get mortgages. They are concerned about healthcare.
And that is something that we can pick up next week because it's something that there's lots and lots to talk about. It impacts everything. So please stick with us. Next week we'll be back with more Money Matters. Have a wonderful week.